pessoal, sejam novamente bem-vindos. Aqui é a primeira conferência do segundo Congresso Brasileiro Christian Wolff e simpósio do Núcleo de Filosofia Kantiana aqui da UEL. Nós agora temos uma palestra do David Hereza Modrego, da Universidade de Zaragoza. And David's going to present it in English and with the PowerPoint, and then you can follow it with the PowerPoint presentation. And it's good to have you with us, David. Do I pronounce your name correctly, David, or is it Davi, as we say in Portuguese?
David.
David, okay. Und Zaragoza, das ist auch, it's actually the same pronunciation, right? Zaragoza?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Sure. Then his talk is going to be about the following topic. Is Kant's criticism of Wolff's definition of contradiction justified? And the floor is yours, Davi, and have a good one.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Manuel, for the organization, and I mean, it's a pleasure for me to be here again in the second Congress of the Brazilian Wolff Society. I have a problem with my camera. I don't know why, but it doesn't work. And I'm so sorry because of that, because I checked before the talk and it was working, but now it doesn't work anymore. I don't know why. I hope you can hear me well, because I'm having some troubles with the connection. So in any case, let's begin with the talk. And first of all, I want to apologize for another thing, a very important thing, that because I made a mistake in the title, and I sent to Emmanuel a title that was incomplete. So the title is not, as you see here, the title was, "Is Kant's criticism of Wolff's definition of contradiction justified?" But it is wrong. The original title of my talk is the following: Is Kant's criticism of Wolff's definition of possibility as contradiction justified? So I'm so sorry because of that. It's my fault, because I don't know why I delayed this part. And it's important to make this title clear, because the topic of my presentation is Wolff's notion of possibility. And the question I want to answer is why Wolff defines such notion, I mean, the notion of possibility, through the idea of contradiction. So the emphasis is in contradiction, but the topic or the goal of my presentation is to understand Wolff's definition of possibility. So indeed, Wolff understands possibility as the absence of contradiction. So contradiction is the criterion which allows us to say whether something is possible or not. So if something involves contradiction, then it is not possible. So it is impossible. And if it does not involve or imply or include whatsoever contradiction, then something is possible. So I think this definition is more or less clear, but what is not so clear, in my opinion, but we can discuss that, is the meaning of contradiction there. And because of that, the proper meaning of the definition of possibility is not clear. So I think it's very important that we focus on this topic about the Wolff's definition of possibility, because this notion, it is well known, is one of the main notions of the Wolffian ontology or metaphysics. But not only that, because, well, as I said, it is well known that the very idea of philosophy by Wolff depends on this notion. So, for example, in the German logic, Wolff defines philosophy as the science of all possible things. So, Weltweisheit ist Wissenschaft aller möglichen Dingen. And in the Latin logic, he defines philosophy again as the science of the possibles, scientia possibilium, as far as they can be. So my goal here is to clarify what exactly is the meaning of possibility for Wolff. And I think it's important because it's not obvious. So Wolff uses this term in different contexts. For example, in his ontology, in his metaphysics, he uses possibility by talking about aliquid, about something, by talking about the ends, because ends is something that is possible. But at the same time, he uses possibility in order to talk about the essence of the being as well as the existence that is defined as complementum possibilitatis, complement of possibility. But so there are like different meanings or contexts in which the term possibility is used, and that makes that the meaning of this notion is not clear, it's not obvious. But it's very important to clarify this notion of possibility because of Kant's influence. According to Kant, Wolff does not define properly possibility because he uses the idea of contradiction. And according to Kant, that is wrong. So, because contradiction can be used only to define what logical possibility is. And well, as Kant points out in some of his lectures, according to Kant, Wolff made a mistake from the beginning in his ontology by defining the idea of possibility according to the idea of contradiction. For example, we can see this quotation in the Mrongovius lectures, written only a few years after the first edition of the Critique. Kant claims, I quote, "One defines possibility wrong when one says possible is that which contains no contradiction. What contradicts itself is impossible, but not the other way around. The thought of it is possible, but whether the thing itself is objectively possible is not yet certain." So the sentence are not fully clear because we are talking about a lecture, so about the things that Mongrovius copied from this lecture, and I will deal with the meaning of this paragraph later. Before that, I want to make two considerations. First, it's important to stress that in his lectures, Kant uses Baumgarten's metaphysics. So, properly speaking, Kant is criticizing Baumgarten's definition of possible, what possible is. However, I will consider here as Kant will have been using the Wolff's ontology because the definition of possibility in Baumgarten's metaphysics and in Wolff's German metaphysics or Wolff's Prima Philosophia is the same. Both define possibility as the absence of contradiction. So what does not involve contradiction, then it's possible. And for reason of timing here, I will not deal in the relationship between Wolff and Baumgarten. So even if Kant criticized Baumgarten's definition of possibility, I will take it as Wolff's definition. Okay. And my second point is that The goal of my talk is not to determine whether Kant is right or not in his criticism. Okay, what for me it's important is just to understand better what Wolff, how Wolff defines possibility, and I think it's very important to deal with Kant's criticism because this can allow us to understand better what Wolff is trying to express with his definition of possibility. Okay, so a question I want to answer, even if it's already mentioned in the title, but if we want to specify more, the question I want to deal with is the following question. Does Wolff speak of logical possibility at the beginning of his ontology when he defines possibility through the idea of contradiction? Because, as I have pointed out, for Kant, the problem with Wolff's definition is that this definition through the idea of contradiction can only mean the logical meaning of possibility, but not the real possibility. Okay, that's an important point I will stress later too. But the question here is that Wolff's definition of possibility, it's only the definition of logical possibility as Kant claims it is. And well, to understand that, my talk will contain two parts. Okay. In the first part, I will explain why Kant claims that Wolff's definition of possibility concerns only logical possibility. So I will explain the reasons why Kant says that the definition of possibility through contradiction is wrong. In the second part, I will try to uncover the meaning of possibility and contradiction involves ontology, since I think there is another interpretation of these terms, and I think Kant misunderstood what Wolff was trying to say with his definition. So, and at the end, I will make a brief conclusion about that. And as I said, I will defend that I think there are good reasons to claim that Kant misunderstood Wolff, and that's the reason why he considered that Wolff's definition through the idea, through the notion of contradiction, is wrong. So Wolff's definition of possibility through the notion of contradiction is wrong. Or with this definition, Wolff is just defining what logical possibility is and not what real possibility is. Okay, so let's begin with the first part that concerns only Kant's criticism. Well, as I have already indicated, Kant consider in this in his lectures that Wolff's definition is wrong because it relies on the notion of contradiction. The reason Kant gives for the rejection of this definition can be summarized in the following statement. That is a very complicated statement, but he claims, sorry, what contradicts itself is impossible, but not the other way around. I think I mean, it's expressed in very cryptic terms, I think, but I think we can express the same saying that while contradiction can indeed serve to define the impossibility of things, so that what Kant claims when he says what contradicts itself is impossible. So, well, contradiction can allows us to say that something is impossible. So, if something contradicts itself, it is not a thing at all. The other way around is not valid, it's not true, because the impossibility of things cannot be defined by contradiction. So, if something is possible, this does not imply that it's contradictory. So that's the main idea of Kant's paragraph. So that from contradiction we can imply the impossibility of things, but with the impossibility of things we cannot imply contradiction. Well, clarifying this idea first requires an explanation of what Kant understands by contradiction. Although there is no precise definition of contradiction in the critique, I think we can say that contradiction is the conflict that arises when ascribing to a thing a predicate, non-A, that is opposed to another predicate A, already ascribed to the same thing. So I created this definition because, in my opinion, that's the reason why, for example, the principle of contradiction is defined in Kant without any temporal references. So, for example, I quote from the critique, the principle of contradiction is the rule according to which no predicate contradicting a thing belongs to it, to the same thing. So the question here is that with the contradiction is not a matter of judging whether something is A and non-A at the same time. It's not about time, but it's about to determine whether a mark, a node, non-A of a concept is opposed to one of the nodes or marks already content in it in the concept. So A, B, C. So that's what Kant calls analytical judgment. So that's the reason why, for example, the ground of analytical judgments is the principle of contradiction, because in one analytical judgment it's only the idea of contradiction at stake, between the contradiction between the nodes or between the marks of the concepts at stake. So I think that's a very important point, because the conflict expressed by the idea of contradiction refers, in my opinion, to a particular way of considering a concept. So, for example, only if we consider the concept as a set of different nodes, determinations, or marks, independently of the reality, then we can talk about contradiction. Okay, that's the important point here. So if we want to judge whether something is contradictory or not, we have to consider the concepts as a set of nodes, as a set of marks. Okay, and that's the reason, and that's the same as we do when we do analytical judgments. When we create an analytical judgment, we contemplate the concepts as a pure set of nodes or marks. So if that's true, if that's true, then the notion of contradiction places us, so to speak, within a realm of pure thought. So a realm that is independent of reality, because the concepts are not just a set of nodes or marks, something like they are more like that than that, but we can consider the concepts just as a set of nodes or marks. But if we do that, if we consider the concept just as a set, a Zusammenhang of nodes or marks, then we are in the science of logic, Kant claims. And for example, that's the reason why Kant can claim that I can think whatever I want as long as I do not contradict myself. That is, if my concept is only a possible thought. Okay, I can create all the concepts I want if they don't entail a contradiction. So if their nodes, their marks, do not contradict themselves. But, however, Kant claims in this well-known quotation, however, to ascribe objective validity to such a concept, so to ascribe real possibility, since the former was pure logical possibility, something more is required. So that's Kant's point. So to talk about real possibility, something more than the pure contradiction is required. Okay, that's because real possibility is to talk about the concepts not just as a set of determinations of or marks or of notes. To prove this, Kant points out that there are some contexts where we speak of reality. So we speak of the possibility, the real possibility of things. And this real possibility of things cannot be determined by the absence of contradiction. That's the second point of Kant's argument. So, for example, Kant demonstrates in his critique in the Transcendental Aesthetic that using the example of a hypothetical geometrical figure drawn with two straight lines. So I quote, take only the proposition that two straight lines cannot enclose any space. So we can try to enclose a space with only two straight lines. And thus, no figure is possible. So for us, it would be impossible to enclose this space with two straight lines. And Kant continues and try to derive it from the from the concept of straight lines and the number two, or likewise try to revive that a figure is possible from three straight lines and try to derive is it pure from the concept. Sorry for the pronunciation. All your efforts are in vain and you find yourself forced to turn to intuition. So, what is trying to say Kant here? Kant is trying to say that in order to say that something is impossible, for example, that we cannot enclose the space with two straight lines, we need something more than the contradiction. That's Kant's point. Because why? Because, for example, if we take the concept of straight lines and the concept of number two, or better, if we take the concept of a geometrical figure, so that something that encloses a space, and the concept of two straight lines, between these concepts, according to Kant, there is no contradiction. So there is no contradiction between the concept two straight lines and the concept of a geometrical figure. Such figure, it's impossible because we cannot enclose any space with two straight lines. But there is no contradiction at all, Kant claims. As we say, I will say it before, in the quotation, something more is required. So we need something more than contradiction. And then this plus, this is the something more than contradiction, is what Kant calls here intuition. So as we can see from these quotations, Kant makes a distinction between two realms of things, between the logical possibility of things and the real possibility of things. According to Kant, for the logical possibility of things, the contradiction is sufficient. But for the real possibility of things, we need something more. We need intuition. But these two realms are not fully independent because in some ways they are connected. Why? Because, for example, we can use contradiction to affirm the impossibility of the real impossibility of things. For example, if something contradicts itself, then we know that it's impossible that it will be real because already it's impossible to be logical, so it cannot be real. But something may well be possible in reality, and that's the point, without being contradictory. So something can be really impossible, something can be a real impossibility, while still lacking contradiction, as for example, the idea of a geometrical of a geometrical figure with two straight lines shows. And that's Kant's point. That's the reason why, if we go again to Kant's paragraph against Baumgarten/Wolff's definition of possibility, that's the reason why Kant claims that what contradicts itself is impossible, but not the other way around. So with contradiction, maybe we can have the criterion to impossibility, but it might be something impossible, real impossible, as this geometrical figure I mentioned, that is not contradictory. And that's the reason why Wolff's definition of possibility through the notion of contradiction, according to Kant, is wrong. Well, I hope this is more or less clear. And let's go to the second part of my presentation. This is Wolff's definition of possibility. Well, Wolff begins his Prima Filosofia. I will focus, for the sake of brevity, just on Wolff's ontology and not in Wolff's German metaphysics or other texts. But well, Wolff begins this treatise by clarifying the principle of contradiction and, of course, the idea of contradiction. He claims, I quote, "One contradicts oneself who asserts that the same thing can both be and not be at the same time. Contradiction is the simultaneous affirmation and negation of the same thing. And Wolff claims contradictions consist of two propositions, one of which denies what the other affirms, or one eliminates what the other establishes. And for example, to make an example, as Wolff notes in an earlier paragraph, an example of contradiction will be, it is not possible for the sky to be calm and at the same time to not to be calm. So here, for example, the contradiction is evident since one proposition, that for example the sky is calm, affirms the opposite of what we can say about the sky, that is not calm. So there is no doubt that these ideas, these explanations, may remind us of Kant's definition of contradiction. But we don't have to think that they are talking about the same. Of course, we can do that, but maybe there are other interpretations of these sentences. Because we have to remember that for Kant, contradiction was not just about saying A and non A, but about contemplating, about considering the concept as a set of notes, of marks. That's the main point here, that maybe the definition that Wolff is using is more or less the same, but the question here is that if Wolff, with this definition, with this explanation of contradiction, wants to emphasize this logical realm of thought. So the idea that we can consider concepts as a set of nodes. To try to say that that's not the case, that even if Wolff is defining contradiction as the conflict between two propositions, we can go to Wolff's definition of impossibility, or the definition of possibility, to check how Wolff is using the idea of contradiction. For example, if we go to paragraph 79, we find this definition of impossible, and Wolff claims that impossible is what does involve contradiction. But it's very interesting. Wolff claims, for example, a geometric figure enclosed by two lines involves a contradiction. We have to remember that Kant in the Aesthetic claims that such figure does not involve any contradiction. But Wolff now is saying that this figure, that is the bilennium rectilineum, so a geometric figure enclosed by two lines, straight lines, according to Wolff, this figure involves a contradiction. And he says, since it presupposes that two straight lines can be contained between the same points, which contradicts the true proposition, between 2 points there can be only one straight line. Therefore, Wolff claims a figure of two straight lines is impossible. So I think this paragraph is very important, because the conflict that Kant refers to as an impossibility that cannot be defined by contradiction appears in Wolff as an example of contradiction. So the figure that, according to Kant, does not involve contradiction involves a contradiction. But of course, one can say that maybe involve this figure or this geometrical example is just a logical one. Like for both mathematics and geometry will be pure logical, and that's the reason why Wolff is talking about contradiction. So we have to focus in order to answer to this question what Wolff means with the idea of true proposition between 2 points there can be only one straight line. And to say that, we can go to the Elementa Geometriae, to the Elementa Matheseos, and then we can go to the Theorem 25, Corollarium 1. In this text, Wolff provides an explanation of the proposition between 2 points only one straight line is possible. And in my opinion, this explanation goes beyond a pure logical justification. So, of course, the Theorem 25 is logically consistent with other theorems, and of course, with the definition of point and a straight line that Wolff defines at the beginning of his treatise. But the point here is that this consistency is tied to a certain construction in space and not is about contradiction. So it's something more than contradiction. Geometry, according to Wolff, is defined as the science of extension, and therefore, in my opinion, his definitions employ verbs such as move, draw, or delineate, so to produce a figure. So it's not about if there is some notes in the concepts that contradict other notes, but it's about the possibility or impossibility to create something in our imagination. Indeed, it's about experience. It's about how we experience space. Okay, and it's not about contradiction in Kantian terms. That's my point here. If we go again to Wolff's example of impossibility, we can claim that, of course, he's using the idea of contradiction, and its contradiction. He claims that, for example, that this figure of two straight lines contradicts the idea of the true proposition between 2 points there can be only one straight line. But this contradiction is not analytical as it is in Kant. This contradiction refers to a geometrical contradiction. Indeed, for example, that's the reason why Wolff claims that, you can see it in the second point, that his definition of impossibility or possibility is compatible with the way in which geometers argue about impossibility. So we can go very briefly back to Kant definition in the aesthetics, and we can see how he ends this quotation saying, Wie es die Geometrie auch jederzeit tut. So it's like the geometers always do, and it's more or less the same conclusion that we can find in Wolff. So the notion of possibility, Wolff's definition of possibility, is according to the definition of the geometers. So, and for example, so we can say that the impossibility of a figure enclosed by two straight lines consists in a conflict in its construction between certain rules or propositions based on a specific kind of experience. It's not about contradiction in Kant's terminology, even if Wolff is using the idea of contradiction to express this conflict between certain rules based on a specific kind of experience. So the same applies, for example, to the concept of iron good, the lignum ferrium. In this case, Wolff claims that it contradicts experience. So it's always the same. Okay, so in light of this example of this lignum ferrium, once again, it becomes evident that for Wolff, contradiction indicates a conflict in the construction between rules based on a certain experience. In this case, it's not a geometrical experience, but a physical experience. So let's go back to the main question of this talk. Does Wolff speak of logical possibility at the beginning of his ontology when he defines possibility through the idea of contradiction? My point is that no, that's not the case. Okay, because according to my interpretation, Kant's and Wolff's meaning of contradiction are different. For Kant, contradiction is the conflict between two opposite predicates or nodes. For Wolff, it's not just that, as the example of the geometrical figure created by two straight lines shows. For Wolff, contradiction is the conflict between rules in the construction of an object. So, if that is correct, the definition of possibility at the beginning of ontology involves prima philosophia, does not aim to affirm the pure thinkability of being, but rather to indicate that every being, by the very fact of being, of existence, will refer to specific rules, to specific principles. Of course, now I will have to talk more about what these principles are and what kind of rules is Wolff talking about. But the goal of my conference, of my talk, was just to try to answer this question. And if my interpretation is correct, the answer to this question is that there are good reasons to say that no. So Wolff is not talking at the beginning of his ontology about logical possibility as Kant says he's doing. So thank you very much, and that's all.
Well, thank you very, very much, Davi. It was a great conference on one of Wolff's most important points, right, in his metaphysics and ontology and stuff. I mean, the concept of possibility is well known to be a milestone, so to say, of Wolff's metaphysics, and I think it was quite didactic, and also for our undergraduate and graduate students to follow as a great conference. I'll speak in português now. A gente vai abrir o espaço agora para as perguntas, comentários, né? Assim, qualquer coisa que o pessoal que está nos assistindo agora tenha para assim, abrir a discussão, abrir o debate, né? Charles, você está por aí? Você consegue me dizer se já tem alguém na linha do YouTube aí para mandar alguma pergunta? Bom, deixa eu ver se eu consigo dar uma olhada aqui. Aparentemente não temos ainda perguntas. Sonia Carboncini is saying it was a great talk, and indeed, good to know that Signora Carboncini ci sta ascoltando. Guillem is saying here, Davi, thanks a lot, Davi. It was really interesting. You've made a really precise point. Just a question regarding the possible causes of Kant's misunderstanding of Wolff's approach. Hang on, I'm not... Wolff's approach to contradiction when criticizing him. Do you think that Kant's rather restricted reading of Wolff may have to do with Baumgarten's peculiar modulation of Wolff? I ask that specifically because, as it seems to me, comparing Baumgarten's Metaphysica to Kant's Vorlesungen, this is the cause for Kant's concept of rational psychology. And I was just asking whether that could be also the cause here. Merci de... that's probably Catalan. Well, David, if you want to answer.
Well, thank you very much for the comments, both to Sonia, Carboncini, and Guillem. To the question, to Guillem's question, well, we will have to look forward an explanation. I'm not sure about why Kant claims that Wolff is talking just about logical possibility. Maybe I could say that in this concrete criticism, Kant is following Crucius' attack to Wolff. So Crucius was the first to criticize Wolff, saying that he's confusing the realm of logic and the realm of reality. I think that's the beginning of this criticism is in Crucius, and I think Kant, as we can know, because of the Nova Dilucidatio, where Kant says that he's following Crucius and in his criticism. So the criticism is the same, and we can say that Kant is just following Crucius in his attack against Wolffian philosophy and against the idea of possibility involved. Yeah, I think it's Crucius the key to understand why Kant is reading in that way Wolff. I don't think it has to do with Baumgarten in this aspect.
Well, Signora Carboncini is also saying that she agrees with your point about Crucius' influence. And now we have Pedro Farhat, who's saying, great talk. I would only like to ask you if you could comment if there is any peculiarity to Kant's critique of the notion of contradiction in the pre-critical text. And he thanks you for your presentation.
Well, thank you, Pedro. Maybe I don't understand what do you mean with peculiarity.
In Portuguese, we say peculiaridade in the sense of Sonderheit in German. There is something peculiar. I mean, because I think it's mostly like English speakers don't understand when I use the word peculiarity.
Yeah. Okay, so, but I don't know. Well, I think it's clear that from the very beginning, well, it's not fully clear, but Kant following Crucius, he's trying to make a distinction between the realm of logical possibility and the realm of real possibility, and this distinction is already present in the pre-critical text, but I don't know if that's peculiar or not. Because or do you mean a specific criticism of the notion of contradiction? Because I don't know what do you mean, or what text do you have in mind? If you can comment briefly or something in the chat, I will be very happy to know. If not,
yeah, just wait a second. I think
yeah.
Yeah, writing.
So my point maybe I don't know if it was fully clear because I wanted to focus just on the idea that what Kant calls logical possibility is not what Wolff, um, what the idea of possibility involves thought. But of course, I will say that the definition of possibility by Wolff will be closer to Kant's definition of real possibility. So that's the point. It's about the essence, about how real things are, and not about how thoughts are made or something like that, as Kant claimed. Sorry, I just wanted to to profit this.
Yeah, I think Pedro has perhaps answered. He said, yes, if there is anything special about Kant's critique in the pre-critical texts, mainly in the essays to introduce the concept of negative magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, in this text, for example, that you mentioned, is very clear that Kant is trying to make this big distinction between logical possibility, for example, about the magnitudes. Kant claims that the only way to introduce the concept of negative magnitudes in philosophy, it's about making a distinction between logical possibility and real possibility. So I think this distinction is already there in the pre-critical text. And this conclusion, according to Kant, is the conclusion that follows from his earlier criticism of Wolff and Baumgarten in the Nova de Lucidatio. In the Nova de Lucidatio, for the first time, Kant criticizes these authors and in some ways saying already that they define the principle of sufficient reason and the idea of possibility in a pure logical way. And that's the reason why they misregarded the distinction that he is trying to do, for example, to introduce, for example, in the text you mentioned. But I don't know if I am answering your question. And
Now let's wait for Pedro's reply. In the meantime, Signora Carboncini asks, just one second. Can you please
yeah,
explain what you mean with the Wolffian rules to define possibility?
yeah, it's a very good question. That will be like the parse construents of my talk that I still working on that. I mean, for me, it's clear that Ball's idea of possibilities about rules. And for example, in the case of the geometric figure that I mentioned, the rules are very clear that they are the Euclid's axiom or the Euclidean mathematics. But in every case, for example, in physics, will be the rules of of physics, and so on. So I think the point here is that the possibility or impossibility of things depend always on a determined science. So, for example, mathematics, physics, even biology or whatsoever. No, that's the reason why I would say that. So, Wolf has this whole project of going on of going deep into every science because in each science are the rules which can define what possible or impossible is. And in the ontology, it's just the general definition of this idea. But of course, I have to go to try to define better what I mean with these rules. I don't know if you have any suggestion or everyone. I mean, I was very happy to hear what you think.
Oh, in the meantime, Pedro is saying, okay, thank you. And let's see if Signora Carboncini has something else to add.
For example, with the case of mathematics, it's clear that Wolff has in mind this Euclid mathematics. So the rules, the positive rules that allows us to say what possible or impossible is, they are the axioms, are the postulates, and the theorems that he's trying to define in the Elementa Matheseus. For example, just to make an example, and the same applies to physics or to other sciences.
Oh, great. If anyone else has further questions, se mais alguém tiver perguntas que gostaria de colocar para o Davi aqui. Se não, daí a gente já vai encerrando esta parte da manhã e daí a gente retoma na parte da tarde. Well, thank you very much, Davi. It was a really interesting talk. It really gave me a lot to think about concerning your main points. And well, we'll be back then with a program. In Brazilian time, it's 2:00. Actually, we would have an official opening in loco at the university here, but because of mainly bureaucratic concerns, we will have to start from 2:00 on. It would be 7:00 in European time, I think. No, 2. I think 6:00, right? In European time. Just one second. Well, Senhora Carboncini is saying thank you, and also Daniela Hrushka, who is a graduate student here in Londrina. Well, then, thank you very much again, Davi, and we'll be back with. Would you like to say something?
Yeah. Thank you very much for all the questions, the comments, and I'm so sorry about the camera. It's a pity, but in any case,
this things happen.
And for the delay, I mean, I'm so sorry, but thank you very much. It was very great to share this investigation with you all, and I'm very happy.
Sure, no problem. We're quite glad to have you with us. Bem, agora eu vou comentar em português, né, o que a gente tinha falado. Então nós vamos retornar aqui às 2:00, que em horário europeu seria às 6:00, com a palestra, a conferência da Luciana Martinez, que vai falar também sobre Wolff e Kant. Well, we will resume with Luciana Martinez talk conference on Wolff and Kant. We also have at 7:00 in European time the conference from Sonia Carboncini, a very interesting conference. She will be holding it in Italian and with my translation into Portuguese. Then we have my conference, Fabio Schirler's conference, a talk from a graduate student, Giovanni Sarto, and then two other main conferences from Robinson dos Santos and Diego Cosbial Trevisan in the evening section, so to say. Then we'll have some conferences on during the afternoon, and then two main conferences also in the evening. Então a gente vai ter algumas conferências agora de tarde, começando às 2:00 no horário brasileiro na UEL, mas também vai ser transmitido pelo YouTube. There will be a transmission by means of YouTube, right? Just reminding that for those who will be holding the talks, we have the StreamYard links that you may use to enter the presentations, and we have the YouTube links that you may share at will, so to say. Then the conferences are being transmitted by YouTube. Bom, então a gente tem os links do StreamYard para aqueles que vão apresentar na respectiva mesa, e a gente tem os links do YouTube que vocês podem divulgar, que são os links pelos quais vocês acessam efetivamente as conferências. Then, a gente vai começar então às 2:00 em ponto na UEL. Then we'll be starting at 6:00 European time in YouTube, and I will keep in mind that we will have all these links in our social media, then Facebook and Instagram. Well, thank you very much again. Just to say, well then, in YouTube you may find the conferences and stuff in this YouTube channel where you're hearing. Listen to it, but there are also other channels that we may use in the meantime, also called Teorias da Justiça Well, 1, 2, and 3, because of this technological issue, so to say that. Well, então, um lembrete para os brasileiros que estão participando, né, no caso que vão se inscrever, porque os estrangeiros geralmente não precisam fazer esse tipo de coisa. A gente tem o link de inscrição, né, que está aberto agora até meio-dia, me parece. A gente vai tentar estender um pouco a inscrição até o final do evento, mas aí fiquem de olho, quem ainda não se inscreveu, por favor, se inscreva, porque isso facilita a vida do ponto de vista burocrático da emissão de certificado e agiliza bastante essa coisa, né? Deixa eu só ver que tem mais algum comentário. Well then, muchas gracias, David. Excuse me that I don't actually, I mean, I can speak a bit Spanish, but
No.
I speak Spanish, it comes Italian anyway. You know, it's just like it, you know. Then, muchas gracias.
Oh,
And
thank you all. Thank you for the organization and everything. We'll see each other in the next talks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, and bye. And we'll see in a couple of hours. Ben,
Bye.